George Miller has had a long and storied history of life on the internet. For a person that the layman may know nothing about, he has embodied our postmodern or post-postmodern era in a way that very few others have. George grew up between the two worlds of Japan and the United States. Quick note on internet culture. In the early days of the internet, these two cultures were the hotbed for what I call degenerate culture. For Japan, the center of this culture was and is 2chan, while for the United States, and in some regards, the broader English-speaking world, 4chan is the center. In almost a religious sense, these websites are the spirit of the internet. Even the layman knows about memes, but he or she may not know that the origin of memes comes from these message boards. George obviously had a difficult time bridging these two cultures, but after some time of making videos online, he found prominence and a cult following. In his videos, he played a character named Filthy Frank, along with other side characters, notably Pink Guy. Spanning almost the entire 2010s, George made videos. The common theme which united them was the attempt to make some of the most offensive content on the internet. George did not seem to leave anyone out of his sight. The Frank character would make fun of every race and gender, while Filthy Frank was a parody of his own viewers. Frank would fit the role of the involuntary celibate type, a shut-in with a vendetta against the world. I was only a brief viewer, so my insight into his works here is very shallow. I don't know if I have enough sanity to try to watch through all his work. This was also a time I will actively suggest that other people do not watch Filthy Frank, but I doubt I could stop you if you've already made up your mind. Before we move on, I would like to make a brief detour pointing out just how influential George has been on the internet. The Harlem Shake was a song created in 2012 and had not yet hit prominence when George, along with some friends, came across the song. They soon came up with an idea to put dance to the song. As the song played, they remained relatively motionless and made vague movements, but as soon as the drop in the song hits, they begin to move freely and get progressively crazier and crazier as time goes on. The Harlem Shake trend. This whole video ended up being just over 30 seconds and ended up creating a viral sensation. The video was uploaded on February 2nd of 2013, and if within 13 days, 40,000 variations have been made, with over 700 million views in total. The Harlem Shake became a global sensation, with several occurrences of people getting expelled or fired for their participation in the trend. Now, it may be clear to you that George may have had an impact on your life that you did not realize. To help give you an idea of what the videos that George created contained, I'll give you a brief account of one video from my memory. In this video, George is being pushed around in a wheelchair by two of his friends. These friends, who are also quite famous in their own respects, take out an electric hair clipper and shave George's head. Then they begin to messily mix his hair into cake batter and throw it into an oven along with several other things that should not be placed into a cake. The trio then takes turns trying to eat the cake without gagging. George, after a while, pretends to vomit fake blood. This is where my memory ends on the video, as it has been removed from YouTube, but I think this will be enough to describe the type of content he created at the time. In 2017, towards the end of the Filthy Frank era, George began to officially release music. Though he had experimented with some more serious music offerings in 2015, George created music under the name of one of his many characters, Pink Guy. Overall, his album entitled Pink Season contains skillfully created music with a lot of the same humor and themes of his videos. Overall, the content was very edgy, and I don't even feel comfortable going over some of the songs. However, I can quickly go over one of the skits on the record. Goofy's Trial depicts Goofy of Disney fame on trial for the mass homicide of children. He's laughing throughout the trial, as his character does, and is trying to plead guilty while his lawyer is trying to get him off on insanity. His lawyer also claims that Mickey Mouse is paying a substantial sum for Goofy's legal fees. Goofy throughout claims to be guilty of the murders and says that a demon instructed him to kill. The songs in the album are also extremely dark and test the borders of what is socially acceptable in music. I remember being shocked that there was a clip online of Jimmy Fallon on his late night show playing a portion of Meme Machine, one of the more tame songs on Pink Season. That same year, in 2017, George dipped his toes into more professional music under the name Joji, the Japanese translation of the name George. While both of his musical personas created cult followings, Joji's music was much more focused on George's own experiences. His first EP, In Tongues, told the story about heartbreak and the bitter feelings left after a relationship ended. While his music under the Pink Guy moniker, had a cult following, none of the Pink Guy music could hope to reach the level of popularity that Joji's music was left with. It is here we can begin to see the end of an era, not just of George's career, but the culture as a whole. Some will say that the numbers are not important. However, they are indicative of what people want and what they are looking for. The market for edgy humor was running out. In 2016, the election cycle marked a major turn in the American conversation. With Donald Trump being elected to the presidency, offensive or edgy humor was now often associated with his person. So many were forced to make a stance. Those who would practice this form of comedy would have to either abandon the form as a whole or target Donald Trump with his very signature style. As this form of humor was already slightly waning due to an aging fan base, this style of offensive humor was widely abandoned. At this time, anyone holding onto any form of this style would make crass jokes about Donald Trump's genitalia and his supposed sexual preferences. So as good artists do, he transitioned into a new space. In September 2017, George released his last video under the Filthy Frank name. Later on, his Filthy Frank Twitter account would state that he was retiring the character. Oddly enough, his reason for quitting the character was that the voice he used for Frank caused permanent damage to his vocal cords. At the time this was announced, I had just started watching his videos. I was approaching the end of my high school career, and this character fascinated me. Both in person and online, his fans did not buy the excuse. Looking back at it, his reasoning was probably half true, but the consensus was that he was tired of the character and wanted to move on with his life. Some saw this as a movement for the better and encouraged George in his future endeavors. Some, predictably, felt betrayed. They saw this as a sign that George was ashamed of them and the videos that they loved. Under the name Joji, George continued to make music that exploded in popularity. As of June 20th, 2020, on Spotify, Joji has 22,678,000 monthly listeners and is ranked 147th in the world. And his most popular song on the service is Slow Dancing in the Dark, with over 800 million plays. He continued to make songs that communicate a wide variety of experiences through heartbreak, substance abuse, and dealing with the fallout of relationships are constant. I'm not sure why, but he has recently made a move away from explicit lyrics, and on his last album Nectar, only 3 songs were explicit, with each having another artist featured on the track. His most recent release is entitled Glimpse of Us, and this is the inspiration for this post. So far, I've stayed relatively objective, but I've failed a bit, and now any illusion of objectivity is about to be dispelled. Glimpse of Us is a beautiful song. I related to this song on a different level than may be immediately apparent. However, I'll start with a surface level reading and I'll go from there. The song is literally about the narrator's relationship with 2 people. He is currently in the arms of one and trying to make this relationship work. However, he reminisces of a relationship with one he loves from his past. Through this, he can identify that when he is with his current partner, he's looking for a taste of what he had in his last relationship. He then asks his past lover if she finds fulfillment in relationships too. As I listened to the song, I couldn't help but cry. Although I've never related to this specific situation, it still rang true. This confused me immensely. Where have I felt this feeling? I would ask myself, and eventually it occurred to me. This is one of those universal experiences. We have a relationship with something or someone and regret what we have lost. Then we try to fill this void with whatever we can find. Often there are things that everyone around us says are the answer, but we find that nothing is quite good enough to recover what we've lost. Sometimes we can never recover what we have lost, but in many cases, we are too averse to the humility it would take to say, I'm wrong, and repair the relationship that was lost. Since I am a Christian, I'm going to see this in Christian terms, but feel free to translate this to your worldview if it helps you approach this idea. It is easy to feel like tripping up makes me no longer worthy to approach God, and that every single mistake can take me away from what I once had with Him. And when this happens, the space is filled by whatever is there to fill it. Sometimes that is something that we would call good, like devotion to one's family. But in the end, how can that compare to the personal presence of God? I then spiral in on myself like a serpent who eats its own tail. I think I've gone too far from God, and there's no harm in going further, as harm has already been done. However, by the grace of God, when I'm at my lowest moments, my mind and my spirit find their way back to Him. And I'm still called back to Him. The decision is again placed before me, as if it were the first time I was asked to come back. Glimpse of us is both utterly tragic, and yet I see a hope on the horizon. This hope, though, is not the easy type of hope. Not the hope that someone will come and solve all your problems, but the type of hope that you are going to have to climb a mountain to get where you need to be. It will be painful. It will be a type of death. But by the end, you'll be more alive than you've ever been. I'll end this with a quote from the one who welcomes you into His arms. If anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life, for my sake, will save it. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world, yet lose or forfeit his very self? Thank you. Well, I'll see you again later.